Gallipo, and I'm the CEO of Randstad here in North America. And on behalf of all of my colleagues at Randstad, male and female, I am very honored to welcome you all to our Women Powering Business panel discussion. We have done probably 8 or 10 of these over the last 2 years in different cities across the United States and Canada. I've probably done about half of those. I've had the pleasure of hosting. And unless something goes terribly wrong today, I can give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect. First, we'll hear from a speaker who is an expert in the field of women in leadership, women in executive positions, and I think that will be great to get the discussion going. And then I will invite some panelists to join me on stage, and we will discuss some issues that are probably either intuitively or unintuitively very present in your daily life. I think when we have these conversations and we have these panel discussions, most women leave going, oh, I thought that was me. It's the first reaction. You know, the next thing you'll leave with, I think, is, you know, I've got some ideas of things I can do for myself, in my career, in my life, in my relationships. And I've got some things that I can do for the men and the women in the organization that I work with so that they can become who they were supposed to become. And it is about the men and the women because, you know, we have to help women go for it. And I think that's going to be a theme today. Women don't always go for it. There's no reason. You know, in preparing for this, the panelists and I always read different studies. I've read hundreds, thousands, and they all say the same thing. You test the men, you test the women. They're just as good. And then they say some version of, if all of life was elementary school, women would rule the world. Because we do great there. But the minute you get into life, competence matters, and strangely enough, confidence matters more. Confidence matters more. Confidence enables people not only to fool themselves and to give themselves that little rush, that little edge that they need to go for it, but oddly enough, the research shows it fools everybody else too. The person who thinks they're great at things manages to convince everybody else that they're great at it too. And very often, men are better at that. Men are better at that than women, and women slowly but surely stop going for it and therefore don't get that regeneration of confidence or reinforcement of confidence that perhaps their less or equally competent colleague gets. So the purpose of the Women Powering Business series is to get everybody together, to learn, to exchange, to inspire, certainly to educate. So I hope that we accomplish all of those things in our very short time today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Betty Spence has served as president of the National Association of Female Executives since 2001. The author of Be Your Own Mentor, she is an expert on women leadership who also consults with organizations on the advancement of women and advises companies on how to engage men to advance women. I notice there are a lot of men here today, so I think that that will be a very well received topic. Betty holds a PhD in English and is on the board of directors of the Girl Guides of Greater New York.
Girl Scout Council.
The Girl Scout Council, Girl Guides, that was Canadian. Girl Scout Council. They're a fine organization of Greater New York City. Thank you very much, Betty.
Hi. It's absolutely wonderful to have been asked to be here today. Now you sort of know who I am, and in a minute I'm going to find out who you are. But what I can tell already is that this is a room full of women with either leadership under their belts or potential to be leaders, and men who are going to be or have been supporting you in this work. And that is a very exciting thing to see. I love going in front of audiences that have a few brave men among these very strong women that come to this event. But first, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you what you think happened when two teams, one male and one female, were fitted with heart monitors and GPS and sent out into the woods to gather mushrooms. When they came back and had their mushroom bushels weighed, which team do you think had the most mushrooms?
Women.
Heavy on the women. I heard a couple of men. Well, actually, the bushels weighed the same. They had the exact same amount of mushrooms. It was equal. But actually, all things weren't equal, because it turns out that the women, as they walked along the path, picked the mushrooms and put them into their bushel, whereas the men sought the bigger patches. They walked farther, much farther. They got lost. And they spent 70% more energy doing it. So, let me ask you what you think about this. Now, I just want you to know this was written about in The Economist. This was a serious study. I love wacky studies. This is a serious, wacky study. It was Dan Abrams, who, as you probably know, is a lawyer who's on MSNBC sometimes. He wrote a little book in which he included this story. And he seems to think that this is an illustrative story for why women are better drivers than men, and better doctors, and better investors, and better loan officers, and better gamblers, and why women get struck less often by lightning than men. Now, I'm not sure about that, but what I am sure about is that it's an interesting take and I think it's illustrative of why we need to have the way women think at every venture that we undertake. We need to have women on the community table at home. I mean, for all of the meetings, for the PTA, for the local government, we need women in our state houses. We need women in Congress in equal numbers to men. We need women in equal numbers in the executive suites in our companies. And we need women, a woman, yes, in the Oval Office. We need women's thinking, women's way of doing things. And I'm going to talk about what some of the studies are saying about the difference in the way women think. But I'm not saying that they should replace men. I'm saying that they should be working alongside men. I'm saying that it's really clear that we need the way both men and women think at every table. So what we're here for today is to talk about women powering business. And that's what the mission of my organization is. NAFI's mission for the last 40 plus years has been to advocate for, to advise, to assist women in moving ahead in their own businesses, because we have small business women who are just starting out at the kitchen table. We have women who have multi-billion-dollar businesses. For women in corporations who are just starting out, for women any place on the ladder, and for women who have reached senior management. We have Fortune 500 CEOs. It's a very big tent that NAFI has spread to work to serve women boldly, is what the mission was when we started the new iteration of the organization. It was founded in 1972, and it was bought by its first woman owner in 2001, which is when I came on board to run NAFI. It came along with Working Mother magazine, which is still around as well, and a wonderful conference division, and now it's also got diversity best practices working with us. And if you have any questions about that, my colleague Jennifer Smythe is over here in the corner, and she can tell you anything that you want to know about any of those wonderful organizations that are making a big difference for women and for men at companies. we have a lot of work that we have to do. One of the things that the NAFI does that I just love is we name the top companies for executive women every year. We have always been naming 50 companies for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It was 25 to start with, and we upped it to 30, and then we made it to 50, and maybe going to go up this year because we have so many companies that can benefit from seeing this list, that can benchmark against the list, and that are where women are doing well now. This is happening now. We're seeing it happening. What we do every year is we bring one woman from each of those top companies together for a roundtable in the spring and in the fall. We call it the NAFI Roundtable. So these are women who are in the C-suite or they're running major operations. And for the most part, they're running multi-billion-dollar operations at companies like IBM and Cisco, at General Mills and General Motors and so on. Women who are in very important roles where they're responsible for a lot of other people. And they are taking it on themselves together to work to move the women up who work in their divisions, the divisions that they are running, and then also the women who are in other divisions. So they're working with the men at their organizations to get them to advance women. This is new. This is a change. The NAFI Roundtable is made up of women basically in their 40s and in their 50s, and these are women who are really absolutely dedicated to moving other women ahead. And it's something that has been delightful for me to work with over the last 10 years to see that happening. Now, I would like to know who you are, what level you are. So let me just ask, how many of you are in middle management right now? Higher. Okay, so that's like maybe a quarter. How many of you are senior executives right now? That's less, that's what, maybe about an eighth? Sixth, well, it went up a little bit more. How many of you are in beginning management or are single contributors, individual contributors? And that looks like it's about a third of the audience. Okay. Now, how many of you are in Fortune 500 companies? Small, about a fifth. How many of you are in nonprofits? A couple. Okay. How many of you work for a firm? Lawyers, consultants, et cetera. Okay. And then how many are in human resources? And that's about a third. Okay. I sort of have an idea of what to aim for here as I'm talking. One of the things that's really, really critical to our list of the top companies for executive women is how many women are actually moving up. So our lists are about numbers. We count how many women are in the C-suite, how many women are on the board, how many women are running these major operations, how many are in line to run these operations. We also look at the policies and the practices that are there to help the women go up. But if the policies and the practices aren't being taken advantage of, then they're just on the books and they don't matter. So we are really looking at the numbers to see if the women are succeeding. And here's why we have to be continuing to do this kind of counting. The numbers are still not very good for women. On Fortune 500 boards, women are still less than 17%. Executive officers, women are about 14%. These are numbers from Catalyst. I don't know if you know the Catalyst organization that works for women in the workplace. That's who I used to work for. Executive officers, 14% as of last December. Top earners, which means the 5 top earners that have to be listed on the proxy statement of a public company to the SEC each year. And among those 5 top earners, women are only 8%. 8 tiny percent. CEOs of the Fortune 500, less than 5% still. It's hit 5% in the Fortune 1000, but it's still a little bit less than 5% in the Fortune 500. And the pipeline, although I don't have an accurate number on this, Catalyst was counting it when I was there and for a couple of years after I left, but they're not counting it anymore. But somewhere around 14 to 15% of the jobs with profit and loss responsibility, which are the ones that will get you to the top. You have to have some kind of revenue generating experience in order to be able to get to the top. And that's somewhere around 14 or 15% right now. So that's still pretty low. This is why we only have 5% CEOs, because the women aren't getting the experience at a young enough age. How many of you knew these numbers? Not very many of you. Are you shocked? Yes? No? Not shocked. Because you felt it in your bones. It just felt right. It's stagnated for 5 years, too. It hasn't been changing. It hasn't gone up. And yet, interestingly, this is the time when women are making about 80% of all buying decisions. Those profit and loss jobs, those are the jobs that decide what a company is going to make or the services that the company is going to sell. And so if 80% of the buying decisions are being made by women, and only 5% of the leadership, or maybe up to 14% of those who are making the decisions for their divisions are being made by women, there is a huge gap between the maker and the market that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I think we're going to see companies falling into that gap over the next few years because, and I think this is really sort of interesting, women are considered the world's biggest emerging market. They are twice the size of India and China put together. Women are the buying market globally as well as in this country. So we need women who are going to be creating the products. We need women who are going to be the engineers. I don't know how many of you love the things that Apple's been putting out. Did anybody get that watch yet? Did anybody see Stephen Colbert smash the watch last night? His old watch? Because he wants a new watch. He wants to send him a new watch. Apple products are designed by men. I was there with my iPod last night. I have a brand new iPod, and I was like trying to get some books, audio books on it, and I had teeny fingers, and it was just making me nuts. And I said, I know that a man designed this thing. A woman designed this thing. We need to have men designing them for men, and we need women to design them for women. Maybe we'll make them in pink. I don't know, but there is a real disparity here, and it's no newsflash that big girls buy. So we need to be putting out the products that women are going to want. And there's another gap I wanted to mention to you, which is the gap in elected office in our state houses and in Washington, D.C. Women are more than half the voters, 54% in the last presidential election, but under 20% of Congress. Did you know that? Under 20% of Congress. There are 20 senators, so that's good, but there are only 79 women in the House of Representatives, so that drops the number down to something like 18% of both houses. And there are 30 women of color in Congress, that's all. And there's 5 governors, 5 women governors. This is something that we can all be thinking about when we're going into the voting booth. And here's the thing. When we elect women, our issues get on the policy-making table. We really need to be thinking about getting our issues on the policy-making table. How many of you remember when you could get fired when you got pregnant? That wasn't that long ago. It still happens in some places, but it was women who fought to get the Family and Medical Leave Act in. So now everyone can have a leave of at least 3 months unpaid in order to be able to have a baby. There's a couple of other things that really interested me that women have done. In 1990, the then, interestingly, bipartisan Women's Caucus, now there weren't very many women, but they worked together across the aisle, they realized that all of the research that was being done on heart disease was being done on men at the National Institutes of Health. And at that point, it was heart disease was the leading killer of women. And so they got together and they passed legislation that started that National Institutes of Health women's study that was on not just on heart disease, but also on breast cancer and osteoporosis, saving thousands and thousands of lives since 1992 when that study began. Now, I know men didn't intend their wives to die of heart disease. They just didn't think of it. It just wasn't on their radar screen when they were making policy. This is why we need to have women at the policy-making table in Washington. So think about running. If anybody is interested in running, you can talk to me at the end of this session today, and I'm happy to put you in touch with someone who might be able to help you run, whatever your party is. And we also need to be thinking about encouraging other people who should be running, encouraging your women friends, or voting for women. I mean, obviously, you don't vote for a woman because she's a woman, but you find out what she represents and see if you can support her. It's also really interesting that it was a woman, Patsy Mink of Hawaii, who pushed for Title IX, which is the reason we can say, go Monet now, because girls can play sports as boys can in schools, thanks to the work of Patsy Mink. So we have to have women at the table. There's a wonderful book that came out this last year by Sally Helligson and Julie Johnson called The Female Vision. And it looks at what women bring to the table, the way women see things. And I thought it was really interesting. The two of them do a really thorough look at what women bring to the table. But something that I thought you would be interested in, and I thought was really quite interesting, was what they found out about the way men and women see work. They found that men often said, I play to win, whereas women viewed work, women rated cooperation over competition. They wanted to work with their colleagues, and a corollary of that. But men liked the metaphor of work as a game. They would call it a game. And women viewed it as useful to society. The women that they were looking at said, I work because I want to do something that's useful. And then men were more likely than women to measure a job's value by its compensation. And women rated collegial relationships higher than money. I thought that was kind of interesting about the useful to society and the collegiality and having work be collegial. It's a whole different thing than competitive. There was a brand new study out. Gosh, forgot about this study. A brand new study that's saying that women found that when there's heavy competition in the office, they're not as creative. They don't feel as free to create, and I think that's probably a fairly common thing. I don't know, men may feel that same way too, but they found that out about women. But even though I'm saying all of this, women are really, really good at investing money, even if they don't think that compensation is the most important thing. And when it comes to risk-taking, it's really pretty interesting. From 2007 to 2013, the hedge fund index itself, the big hedge fund index, lost 1%. And of course, that was during the period where we had the major decline in the economy. But while the hedge fund index lost 1%, funds run by women returned 6%. And last year, they returned nearly 10% compared to the index's 6%. How many of you have a woman managing your money? How many have both women and men matching, taking parts of your money and investing it for you? The evidence on the stock market and gender is in the saliva. Going back to my love of wacky studies, wacky researchers tested the spit of stock traders in the morning, and they later checked their profits. And when men had high testosterone in their saliva in the morning, they tended to take greater risk. The upside being, of course, sometimes they booked a boatload of cash. But testosterone is a somewhat tricky thing. And so when rationality might have been touched a little bit, and when male traders crashed, they really crashed. Women's testosterone, not that we have a lot of it, but it's there, it remained pretty steady, and their risk-taking wasn't affected by what was going on in their spit. Now, do you remember what Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times quipped right after the big crash from 2007, 2008? He said that had Lehman Brothers been Lehman Brothers and Sisters, we might not have had the financial crisis. it's very interesting to look at what women's role was during this period of time. There were a few women whistleblowers who were not listened to. So that's why I'm saying, isn't it time that we put women in the leadership positions, that we made sure that women were in the leadership positions in order to work alongside men, so that we can have the men taking the risks and making that boatload of cash, and we can have the women who are doing nice, steady returns for us so that we have a future. I'm looking forward to the time when women are at the top of all financial firms alongside men, that when at all our companies they're alongside men. And here's what the research shows, what women like you in this room bring to your organizations. You're designing products that women will buy, as I mentioned earlier, but you are increasing product safety. Women are paying attention to product safety with the products. Strategic growth is something that women are really interested in. Strategic growth by focusing on the long-term results over the quick profits. And then studies are showing that women are really succeeding through collaborating, through team building, through consensus building, and through listening. There are men, corporate board chairs and CEOs who've talked about the difference that women make when they come on the board and when you have enough. What they're saying is a critical mass on a board, or actually on any organization, is having three women, or three of whatever will make a difference, because it's no longer a token that you're dealing with, and there's a nice intermingling. So that kind of change means that they're getting better governance, say the CEOs. The women are listening, the women are asking questions. The women aren't necessarily, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. They're actually, a lot of the guys on the boards are saying, we're really doing much better work now because we're actually really working things through at the board table that we weren't doing it before, now that we have 3 women on the board. As you can tell, I'm really a big woman booster, and I want to be your booster in this room tonight. Today's women are really a whole new breed of executive. And the one that I like to bring up as an example is Ellen Kullman, who is the CEO of DuPont. Any of you been following Ellen Kullman's career at all? She's been running DuPont for about 7 to 8 years. In that period of time, she changed the tagline of DuPont from the chemical company to the science company. She has become a leader in sustainability. She's made this chemical company turn into a company which has a 40% smaller carbon footprint, and working with her clients to narrow the carbon footprint of their organizations as well. And she's also working with African nations and other nations where famine is an issue in order to be able to overcome those kinds of problems and issues. She is not atypical of what I am seeing as women move into these senior positions. Nice, effective stewardship of our organizations, and leading to effective stewardship of the planet as well, which of course is really important. So the question for all of you is, how do you get to those leadership positions? How do you get to those senior positions like Ellen Kullman is in, where you can make those kinds of changes and have that kind of influence? And I was asked to give a few pointers to the group. And so I distilled 7 points from my book, Be Your Own Mentor, which I wrote while I was at Catalyst, and also from the work that I've been doing at NAPI. So I have seven strategies for success, and I will go through them fairly quickly. The first one is, as most of you would probably expect, perform. You got to perform or you're not going to succeed. You perform beyond expectations. You deliver early, on time, earlier, and that's how you build your credibility. So that's always the most important thing, is performing. But second, I'm hoping that you will be clear about what you want. What do you want with the job? Do you want to run a company? Do you want to run an organization within your company? If that's the case, then you need to be thinking, and a lot of you are at this age right now where you could be making this decision, whether you want to be on the line side or whether you want to be on the staff side. Both are excellent jobs. We have a lot of people in HR who are on the staff side. Operations jobs are the ones that are responsible for generating the revenue and making sure you don't lose money. And that's the experience that you need in order to be able to move to the top. They're called line jobs, profit and loss jobs. This is sales. This is being responsible for other people who are bringing in the revenue. The other jobs are the support jobs, the staff jobs, and those are legal, HR, finance. Am I forgetting anything? IT for sure, yes. And excellent jobs, nothing wrong with them, but they're unlikely to lead to the top position. So be thinking about that as early as possible in your career and see if you're interested in it, getting yourself into a P&L job as soon as you can. Risk taking. You have to take risks in order to be able to make it to the top. I think women are great at risk taking. As I was saying with the investment, the hedge fund investment, women take qualified risks. Women think risks through pretty well. But I also want to impress upon you that women tend not to take jobs until they know at least 80% of what the job is going to be. It's the 80-20 thing. Men will take a job if they know anything about it at all, but we usually say it's about 20% because they know they're going to learn. They know they're going to figure it out. Whereas women don't feel confident in being able to do that, and so usually wait until they know 80%, which means a lot more time has gone by and maybe the offer has passed and you haven't gotten it. So take the risk, know that you're smart and that you can learn on the job and that you don't have to take a lot of time before you take the job itself. Find a mentor. My book is called Be Your Own Mentor, and that's because it's sort of a desktop mentor, but a flesh and blood mentor is something that everybody needs and always has needed. In 1982, the Harvard Business Review said everybody who makes it has a mentor. It's still true. However, it seemed to work a lot better for men than it did for women, and still does, because men took the young guy under their wing and reminded them of when they were younger and worked with them to help them advance in more ways than just advising. Yes, they'd say, make sure your socks match, or when you go into this meeting, make sure you're prepared, or did you hear what John said about this? But they also took them out on the golf links and introduced them to other people in the company, and they brought them home to the barbecue. And probably not a lot of wives want to see such beautiful women as you are filling this room coming in through the door for the home barbecue. That's always stood in the way for women. So my fifth strategy is find a sponsor. A lot of companies are putting together formal sponsorship programs now, and I'm working with a lot of companies on doing this. And once it becomes part of the culture for men to sponsor women, it gets much more comfortable for the men to do this. And because men are in most of the senior level roles, it's really necessary for most of us to have a male sponsor. Although the women that I've been working with, who I was talking about earlier, who are the senior executives at the Fortune 500 companies, are all sponsoring women as well as men. A sponsor is different from a mentor, and I want to delineate the differences, and I also want to make it available for you, so we'll have it online for you. The difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor advises on all sorts of things, whereas a sponsor creates opportunities for you, goes out and finds out what there is out there for you, and talks to people about what opportunities there might be for you. The mentor coaches on a private one-to-one basis, whereas the sponsor champions you publicly. He says, this person is working for me, Linda, she is spectacular, and you really have to consider her for this position. Or in fact, I think you should put her, I don't think you should even hesitate, you should put her into that position. So obviously a sponsor is spending political capital on you when sponsoring you, but it's a very essential role. Men have been having this for decades, and women have not. A mentor will comfort you, will ballast you, will support you when you're having difficulties with your advancement, whereas a sponsor will fight for you and open up doors for you and open up avenues for you. It's really out there for you. A mentor will talk about what a leader is and the kinds of things that you need to do to be a leader, whereas a sponsor will ensure that you move into leadership. It's going to make sure that that happens for you. A mentor will probably coach many people during his or her career, Whereas a sponsor will probably have only a handful, if even that many, proteges during his or her career, because you just can't spend that kind of capital too often. People pick their mentors. You would go to someone and say, can you give me some advice on something? Whereas the sponsor picks the protege. And if you want to know some more details about how to get a sponsor to pick you, come up to me afterwards, and I'm happy to share some of that with you, because there's certain things that you can do to invite that kind of attention from a potential sponsor. Mentorship is given. Sponsorship is earned. You have to be someone that is so good that someone wants to sponsor you, because he or she is going to spend capital on you. So in order to be able to get the mentors and in order to be able to get the sponsors, you need to get out there. This is advice number 6, I think we're up to. So network. You're here networking today. You got to do it a lot. Women tend to not have the time to do it, but I think it's one of the very most important things that you can do in your whole career, is to make the connections. Everybody that I hire is someone that I've met through my network. Everybody that has hired me over the last 15 years has hired me through a network or brought me in to speak. I would like to know the connection for how I got to know you guys, because that was probably through some interesting networking thing. And then the last, number 7, is do take responsibility for your own advancement. You're not going to be discovered. It's not like Hollywood and you're sitting there and someone comes in and says, I'm going to make you a star. That is not going to happen. You need to decide what it is that you want to do, and you need to make sure that you are finding the opportunities, planning, working with your HR people and HR working with you to plan what you're going to do for your future. Get your career pathway clear in your own mind, and then find the people who can help you do that. Don't let the naysayers get you down as you're planning your career, because you'll hear a lot. There's a lot, everybody's saying you can't balance, you can't have it all. It's not true. Ellen Kullman has three kids. And she was on the stage at my event on a panel 2 years ago. And she announced to the 500 people in the audience that after my event, she was going back down to Delaware, where her 2 twin 17-year-old boys were having the whole soccer team over for a barbecue, and she was going to be working with her husband to feed them all. She's the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company, and she is a mom of 2 17-year-old boys and a younger girl. You can do it. You can use your mentors and your network to help you figure out how to do it, but it is certainly doable. You need to do these things because you are needed. I hope today that you have felt how urgent I think it is that you women take leadership roles. Your companies need you, the nation needs you, and I can't wait to know what you're going to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you for that big piece of inspiration. I'm inspired. It's my pleasure today to introduce the panelists. First, we have Addie Braun. Addie is the head of industry branding for Google. And throughout her career, Addie has spent some time at Northwest Airlines, at GE Consumer Products, and at Smith Barney. What I love most about Addie's background is the wide span of highly conservative and very progressive companies, so I'm eager to hear her perspectives tonight. And she's also a sommelier, so I'm eager to hear her perspectives at the cocktail hour. Next, we have Becky Gillespie. Becky is an award-winning journalist and author, as well as a businesswoman. Her expertise in work-life balance and women entrepreneurship has landed her on MSNBC, NBC5, WGN-TV, The New York Times, and Chicago Cranes. And somehow in the middle of all of that, she has managed to inspire statewide reform for our public schools. So I'm pretty sure that Becky has made a positive impression for a lot of lives through her good work. And last but certainly not least, we have Chloe Korova. Sorry about that, Chloe. Chloe is the president of University of Chicago's Women's Business Group. She's a certified financial planner, and she is the owner of Modern Capital Concepts, yes. So that in and of itself is certainly impressive. But what impresses me most about Chloe is that while she has her MBA with honors from University of Chicago's Booth Business School, arguably the top or ranked in the top of business schools for finance, which is difficult for me to say, given the Kellogg-Booth rivalry we have here in Chicago. But nonetheless, true. She also has counseled CEOs, CFOs, and held management positions in equity trading. And yet she chooses to spend her time helping middle-class families achieve their financial dreams and goals, and helps counsel women successfully on their compensation negotiations. So with that, and Linda said to make a big entrance or not be afraid, so I'm going to counsel with Chloe and then we can talk. So without further ado, please warm welcome for our esteemed panel.
All right, so let's get the party started, as they say. Our first topic is going to be the confidence gap that I alluded to in my opening comments. There was a book published this year called The Confidence Gap. There's been quite a few articles written on the subject, and basically, you see how confident I am? I need no mic. And so basically this book says women don't go for it, lack courage in organizations, and worse, when they do win, when they do come out on top, when they are the best, when they do a great thing, they tend to attribute it to luck, to others, to a variety of things, and in so doing, they sort of dilute their own success. So just to start off with, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Who'd like to start? Go for it. All right.
Well, first of all, I think confidence, the confidence issue is tightly correlated with perfectionism, which is something I've written a lot about and studied. And the two are intertwined because they feed into each other. When women are feeling underconfident, a lot of times they will use perfectionism as a crutch and say, okay, I know I've just crossed the finish line, but now I'm going to run 8 more laps just to show that I can still do it. And it winds up affecting their effectiveness, their efficiency. But when you're aiming for perfect, you're also setting unattainable ideals. And when you don't reach those ideals, it tends to chip away at your confidence. So it becomes a cycle that feeds in and of itself. And when I wrote a book about working mothers that was originally not supposed to be about perfectionism, but it became about perfectionism because it kept coming up in so many of the interviews and because we gathered data on the issue, asking women what some of the biggest obstacles were to their success, both at work and at home. And we had predicted that the biggest obstacles were going to be external factors, such as financial pressures, inflexible policies at work, division of labor issues, like husbands not doing as much at home, that kind of thing. And the number one obstacle for the women we surveyed, for 67% of the women, was feeling like they needed to be everything to everyone all the time. It was making them stressed out. It was exhausting them. It was chipping away at their confidence. But what's more is when we delved into the data, we found that a third of the women that we had surveyed described their overall approach as, I need to be the best at everything all the time. Another third described their approach as, I want to be good enough and happy, both at work and at home. So we again made a prediction, and we figured the first group that needed to be the best all the time would be more successful, but the ones that wanted to be good enough and happy would be happier. And our data showed that that second group, who we called the good enoughs, we called the other group the never enoughs, they were just as likely to advance in their careers, and they were happier. They were more successful, and they were happier. And it was really interesting. They felt they were happier with the sacrifices they had made. They were actually less likely to think of them as sacrifices. They were happier in their marriages. And when we really dug in, we found that they were more successful because they were more efficient. They were better at meeting deadlines. And they were more confident.
So Addie, you must work at a very competitive organization
Yes.
with lots of superstars.
Yes.
How do the women do? Are they confident? Too perfectionist,
yes.
perhaps?
Yes, there is a lot of perfectionism at Google, as you can imagine. You are working with all type A's, all rock stars, all valedictorians of their high school and their college and their MBA. I mean, it's just, the competition is fierce. What's nice, though, at Google is that there is a nice balance between male and female, and oftentimes where I feel my most competitive force coming from is the other females that are either at my level or one level above. And so I say that because I think that's also the other elephant in the room that I've just become aware of myself, is that women aren't the enemy either. There tends to be a bit of jealousy. There tends to be, right? Betty was inspiring in that I have to help. I have to constantly remember to help all the other women around me, and that we're not against each other, but we're with each other. And I think that's also part of the way that I was brought up. I'm Generation X, and I had to prove constantly that I could do what a male could do. My father believed in me and encouraged me, yet at the same time, because he said, you can do anything you want, Addie. Therefore, I thought I had to do everything. And therefore, that perfection paralysis has always been with me. And I constantly think about, will Dad be proud? Will Dad be proud? And I'm not saying I have daddy issues, but I still want to address, some of that where this all started. This just starts on the playground. This starts when Dad says, you're good enough, you can do it all. Therefore, I feel like I have to. And then the perfection paralysis stops me from trying chess, or stops me from trying, baseball, because there's no way I'm going to hit it as hard as a guy, and therefore I'm not even going to try. So I just kind of covered a lot of territory there. But
we're good. We're done.
Okay.
Chloe, what would you say? First of all, it's very interesting. I think Addie's subject of women competing with women before they even get to the men.
Right.
I think is a subject that is probably a whole discussion in itself. But perhaps coming back to the confidence issue for you first.
Well, I certainly know a lot about women competing with other women, because at University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, I was telling somebody earlier, there's no passive aggressive at the Booth School of Business. It's active aggressive. So especially with other women, you're kind of like, you're on your guard, because you kind of want to know who's going to be the alpha female in that relationship. Was totally nonsensical, because nobody advances. But as far as confidence, the confidence gap, I think, confidence is such an ambiguous term, and in some ways it's just not helpful to say, you just need to be more confident. Everybody has their own definition of what confidence is, and I think it's really important for people to define themselves and what this means, because it doesn't necessarily mean being competitive, you know? Like for me, confidence is personal power and that ability to persuade, and part of that ability to persuade is being a really good listener. And for me, that's my way of building confidence. And it's just focusing on those things that I do really well, understanding my strengths and weaknesses, and building on those strengths, and not being a perfectionist in everything. I tell my friends at business school, go golfing, it's like, look, I play golf, but I'm very committed to being mediocre. Okay, I'm not going to be competitive in sports at all. I will have fun, but don't expect me to compete. So we have to pick our battles, and we'll be a lot more satisfied, in our life if we're not striving to be the best at everything, but do understand what you can be famous for.
Absolutely. I'm going to change. I'm kind of going to bring these two topics together in my question. My next question for you, Betty, is, confidence plus perfectionism, lack of confidence plus perfectionism usually plays itself out like this in the workplace. A lot of studies have shown this. There is a position available. Either one, if you're in a large organization that's posted, if you're in a smaller organization, one that everybody knows about. And you have male applicants, you have women applicants. Time and time again, studies have showed that the woman will look at the qualifications, and if she doesn't have 100%, she won't apply. And in her mind, her not applying will be reinforced because nobody tapped her on the shoulder and said, you should apply, right? Nobody did that. So she said, if I would have been right, I've kept my head down, I've worked really hard, somebody would have told me. And then, unfortunately, the men did not get that memo, right? So they have 50%, very often the male applicants, and they say, I'm perfectly able to apply for that job. I am confident I can learn the pieces I don't have, right? I am perfectly able to apply for that job and do. So women apply for jobs where they lack nothing, and men apply for jobs where they have maybe 40 or 50% of the competencies necessary, or the experience, or the qualifications, often get those jobs, and tend to move up quicker. Nobody stopped the women from applying, right? Nobody told the man he should apply. There's all sorts of thought processes going on here, but yeah, that confidence meets perfectionism, and what we have is men moving up because they go for it, and women staying put. And that, in watching the men move up and them not move up, that perhaps reinforcing that they weren't right anyway.
Let me ask the audience something here. Is this resonating with you? Is this who you are? How about what you're seeing in your daughters? How many of you have daughters who are, in their teenage years or younger? A few of you. Are you seeing this in your daughters as well? This kind of confidence gap. I was speaking earlier about a friend of mine who is a coach and a counselor who volunteered to work with a group of high school seniors at a very exclusive, I guess you'd have to call it, private school out in California. And she said, first of all, the girls had no presence. They didn't have that confidence of their presence at all. They were all sort of slumping. But they also, one very brave girl in the audience told her that she feels terribly competitive with all the other girls about getting into school. So to like put that kind of thing together, what can happen. So my recommendation to anyone who is feeling that this is them is to get a coach and work through how to have executive presence. One of the most important things that you can have when you're in an office is to have executive presence. And if you don't feel that you've got that, a coach can help you get it. And there's some very quick things that you can learn to do to fake it for a while until you really feel it. Fake it till you feel it. The perfectionism thing is something that I know, because I was a perfectionist for all of my life until I was working I actually had a woman boss, and I was speech writing for her. One day I was putting it through so many drafts, and she came in and she ripped the thing out of my hands, and she said, "Don't let the best be the enemy of the good," which is a great motto. I have lived by it ever since. I'm a much better gardener. I'm a better golfer. Everything. Just don't let the best be the enemy of the good.
But what can organizations do? So given that we know this, and given that most of the people here today work in companies that want to see more women at the top, and so we know this, it's well documented, this is how women behave in hierarchies, this is how men behave, what could organizations do to perhaps help women throw their hat in the ring and maybe be more successful, or maybe even think of themselves as candidates? Any thoughts on that?
I can jump
Yes,
in
ma'am.
there as working for a big corporation. So Google does a couple of these things well. There's no surprise. Google is one of the best companies to work for, and it is because of some of the things that they do for women, or just to keep the workplace very transparent and available for all to win. So two things that they do. One is that they publicize their diversity numbers. That in itself is one of the most transparent and walk the walk, talk the talk thing that any corporation could do. Our numbers are low. Our numbers for females are low, both in the sales and in the tech space of Google, but also minorities and other different groups are very low. And so instead of Google being a victim to the media or to the press, we put those numbers out there and said, we know they're low. They're lower even than the tech companies that we're partners with, right? And we're going to change this, and we're going to own up to it. And world, hold us accountable. And so doing that also was a big, I guess, nod in the right direction internally that, okay, Google is really serious about this. So I thought that was interesting, and I think by Google doing that, it's going to start putting pressure on other tech companies and other companies to do the exact same thing. The second thing that Google does internally to then help the advancement of anybody who performs, anybody who is worthy of that, is called unconscious bias. We're really trying to make the unconscious conscious. Google has put an annoyingly amount of effort into this. Google girls over here, my team, we have had to go through numerous trainings, numerous testings, numerous call-outs, even in real time, that challenge me that I am making an unconscious bias of who I want to work for me, the comments that I say, the way that I appear in meetings, or who I talk to, who I don't talk to. I mean, there is so much going on that we are now all of a sudden being made aware of. And it was part, whoa, scary, like this really is real. And then the fact that Google's acknowledging it in such a big way, I can't help but not walk into work every single day and remember that I have these 3 unconscious biases that I need to just face. And so I think those 2 things are a really good start for a big corporation.
Fantastic, fantastic. Chloe.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you bring that up. And I work in financial services, and I was in equity trading for a long time, which is very, very, very male-dominated. And financial services, or even at the Booth School of Business, it's only about 30% females, within our student population. We haven't really been moving the needle. And I did work for a very large nationwide financial services firm, and as a financial advisor, not a lot of female financial advisors, and I was at a retreat, and I mentioned to this table of advisors, they're all male, I said, I have this admin, and his name is Josh. And he said, what, you've got a male admin? Doesn't he want to be a financial advisor someday? And I said, yeah, he does, and I totally support him in that. And I said, did you ever ask your admin what she wants to do? Because I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life working for you. And that entire table went silent because nobody had ever asked the woman, their female admin, what she wanted to do eventually. And I think that, it's really, really simple. For a lot of organizations, we have these biases, we have to recognize them, but we just need to ask women in our organizations what they want to do, and nobody is asking us. Nobody's asking us, and it's a really simple thing to change.
Excellent. Let's change the subject a little bit and talk a bit about language and behavior. So, has anybody seen the Pantene ad or video to tell us to stop saying sorry, right? So there's lots written about that. Women apologize. I'm sorry. Theories on why we do that. We want to be liked, we want to be nice, we want to kind of inoculate the group before we say, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, I'm sorry if you've already answered, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question. We all do it, right? I think after you see that video, you realize how often you do it. Is that one of the conscious, unconscious?
No.
Oh, okay.
But that's basically an internal one.
Kidding.
No. Sorry. No, I'm sorry, it's not.
So, the overuse of the word sorry and why women do that and the psychology behind it. Then on the flip side, you have words like bossy and pushy. Why are men not bossy, right? Why is pushy not a bad thing? There was a big, scandal, a news story recently when the editor of the New York Times, this is her job, we don't know why, we don't know the story, we never will. Apparently, there was some discussion of pay and how her pay differed, but in the justification or people discussing why she was probably let go, it turns out, God forbid, that she was pushy. Imagine that, editor of the New York Times being pushy. Clearly, she wasn't nice enough. What does this mean? Why do we not want to be pushy? Why do we apologize all the time? And what can women do to kind of shed some of those those nicey nice shackles?
Well, I think there's, first of all, a lot of cultural conditioning, which we've talked about. A lot of words that we use to describe women, we don't use those same words when we're describing men. I was speaking at a company in Ohio yesterday and talking about perfectionism and confidence, and somebody asked me afterwards, well, do you find sometimes, in the women that you've interviewed and studied, that when they do develop that confidence, that they cross the line to arrogant? And I said, I find that they get accused of crossing that line to arrogant, or more commonly, that they are afraid of crossing that line to arrogance. So many of the women that I've interviewed, and it's hundreds of women at the top of their profession, talked about constantly walking this tightrope between being weak and whiny and vulnerable and being pushy and bitchy. And they're constantly walking this tightrope. And the other thing I heard from so many of them, and I'm talking about really successful women who have achieved really amazing things, having what's sometimes called the imposter syndrome, where they know, they're afraid they're going to be found out because they know that their reality doesn't match their highlight reel. Has anybody in here ever felt that way, that you're afraid people are going to find out that you're not your Facebook status update? And I have talked to so many women who have experienced that, and a lot of times they almost apologize to make up for that in advance. When my co-author and I were researching our book, we had a whole bunch of women, actually one of whom is here today, that we interviewed in great depth over a period of a couple of years. And at some point, near the end of the writing, we decided that the one thing we were missing was to hear some of these women talk to each other. So we got 12 of our favorite ones, all of them really, really impressive women, all of them, and got them to all come to New York City for a roundtable discussion that we facilitated, where we hashed out a whole bunch of these kinds of issues. We had a great discussion, and a few days after the roundtable, I was interviewing one of the women, and she said, I really had a great time. I'm so glad you asked me there, but I'm sorry, I sort of felt like I didn't belong. I didn't deserve to be at that table. And my jaw dropped, because this woman was truly impressive, as were all of them. And I said, really? And she said, well, I'm not juggling things as well as the other women at the table. I really don't feel like I have it as together as the other women at the table. And so it really surprised me. About a week later, another woman who had been at that table said the same thing. She said she felt like she'd been the odd woman out. Then a third said that, and a fourth said that. A third of the women at that impressive table felt like they didn't deserve to be there. And what I realized all of them were doing is they were deciding in their own heads what the other women were thinking and feeling. And so they knew their reality in their heads. They knew what was going on in their heads, but all they had to figure out the other women is what the women were saying. And so I asked one of them, I said, well, what did you think of me facilitating? She said, you seemed really confident. And I said, well, do you want to know what was going on in my head during that round table? And what was going on in my head during that round table is that my iPhone kept vibrating. And I could see that there were all these text messages coming in from my husband, who knew full well that I was in New York City facilitating a roundtable. And I couldn't see what the messages were, but I could see text messages. And then I saw emails coming through. And then he started private messaging me on Facebook and DMing me on Twitter, reaching out through every method possible. And so what I started thinking in the back of my head is, I shouldn't have left Chicago. I shouldn't be here. My family can't cope without me. What am I thinking writing this book? What am I thinking doing this? And it was sort of devolving in the back of my head while I'm up there facilitating the roundtable. At the end of it,
What did he want?
he wanted to know if Girl Scouts was at 5 or at 6 the next day.
Oh my God.
The next day.
Emergency.
You need to get him a Josh.
Yeah. But the point is, you don't know what's going on in anybody else's head, or what their little issues are that they're trying to work out when they're up there
That's hilarious.
putting on a bright face.
Hilarious. But Chloe, is it a double standard? You know, are men forceful and women pushy?
Oh, I'm very pushy, I hate to admit.
You seem pushy, in a good way.
I'm a very
Yeah,
pushy
sorry for
person.
saying so.
Sometimes people need a pushy leader. Let's face it, if you're a project manager, you gotta push people, you gotta push them, push them, push them. If you're a coach, you know, you want a pushy coach. And I think what's really important is, I always try to have an adaptive leadership style. I think that's something where women can really excel at, you know, because we're really good, because we like to take in a lot of information, figuring out, you know, who are we talking to, you know, and what's the best way to lead, what is the best way to coach, to develop other people, you know, and sometimes you do need to be pushy, and sometimes you need to sort of, you know, take a step back and be, you know, laissez-faire. But I think that women are really good at this. But I think that if you are going to be pushy, let people know. It's like, hey, we got a big deadline, you know, and I'm going to push people because I think that you guys could really achieve this, and it's going to be awesome when we have this done, and we're going to celebrate. But we're all going to go the extra mile. So you need to explain people, give them a context why you're doing this, not just because, oh, well, you know, this is just how I am, and too bad for all of you, and you have got to suffer through this. You know, everybody has to know what is that big goal that we're striving towards, and put that context, you know, but also know it's like, yeah, you know, sometimes I do need to pull back because everybody's kind of fine on their own, and they're just looking for me for support every now and then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about networking. You touched on that in your opening, Betty. I think that was very interesting, and that's a subject that's often been talked about in these panel discussions. You know, women network differently. Men are often very good at leveraging their network. Kind of, you know, they have no problem using their network for personal and business purposes, which is I think is fully expected. Women are better personal networkers. Spend time forging those personal relationships, but often aren't quite as adept at leveraging them for their career, for their business, whatever. Is that the case? And if so, you know, what behaviors can women engage in to become better networkers?
Well, one of the things that's different about the way men network and women network is really fundamental here. And I first learned about it when I was raising money for a nonprofit, that men are very accustomed to calling on each other to do things. So John will call up Jim and say, you know, I need $10,000 for United Way. Fine, you have the check. And he knows that he can then call on him and get, you know, $10,000 for the Red Cross. Whereas women give to causes that they are really interested in, that they really care about, that they really like. Men just do those things for each other. So men will call on their network for all sorts of things, but women feel like they are imposing if they ask for stuff like that. And so Sally Helgeson, who I mentioned earlier in her book, The Female Vision, talks about, instead of looking at this as people who are doing stuff for you, or even as networks, think about building allies. And so you've got people that you can call on when you need stuff, but who can also call on you when they need stuff. You don't have to feel guilty about asking someone to help you out, which women tend to do altogether too much, I think.
Absolutely.
But as I said in my remarks earlier, your network will support you at all times. I mean, it's where I have hired everybody through the connections that I have. But a network will also sustain you if you lose your job, if you want to change your job. You can talk to people about how to go about it and get contacts that way. Through the good times and the bad times, the network will be there for you. And so I think it's as important as anything else that you will do in your career. You should make sure that it's part of your job description to get out and make those kinds of connections and build those allies. By doing stuff for other people, they will want to do it for you, and you don't have to feel like it's out of balance.
Well, and when women network with men, perhaps some of the laws of the jungle of male networking should be a skill that we develop, right? Because I think you're correct. I think we are too reticent to leverage our network. Adi, Google is, more than a company, it's an ecosystem, isn't it? It's an enormous planet all on its own, I would imagine. That networking, and I mean, you are in such a competitive field, but also in a field where there are strong networks and there are movements.
Yes and no. At Google, you tend to get a little bit siloed into what you do. I personally have to force myself to remember to network. There's two things working against me. One, I'm an introvert. Two, I know you wouldn't maybe know that, but two, I've been comfortable in my job for 8 years. But that could change. Everything could change. And so I need to constantly remember, and I just recently hosted a networking event at Google and talking about the importance of it and what a mentor is versus a sponsor and how to just do it, just go for it, but have a strategy. Be smart about it, do your research, do your homework before, who's going to be in the room, what value can you add, also what value are you looking to gain.
Really kick that perfectionist thing, I can see.
Clearly, right? I have my checklist of all the things that I'm going to do so I don't fail at networking. I mean, seriously, you just saw the inside of my brain as to why maybe I don't network, because I'm waiting to be perfect at networking, but I'll never get perfect if I don't do it. So just one of those things that I know this is just silly games that we play in our mind, but the fact is that you just have to do it. You can't be afraid of it, and you can't feel guilty about it that you're asking for something, because you know that there will be tit for tat eventually, or let me have the ability to reciprocate at some point in the future. I hope I get called on to reciprocate something in the future.
And even if they don't call on you, you do stuff for them.
Exactly, right. Exactly.
You make connections for them, send them stories, articles, whatever.
Yes, thinking of you because of X, Y, and Z, or what do you think about this, or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo, everything that's been said, and you had mentioned allies. I call it the A-team. Remember the A show? Anyway, nothing like, no, you're not building that. But, you're looking for people who really recognize who you are and what you're capable of becoming. And I think that's really, really important. And not just, having women on your A-team, but also men. And one thing that I find as far as building executive presence, one thing that I recognize that I need to get better at is, just learning how to talk to men. Because especially in financial services, guys, they have a certain vernacular, there's a certain way, they use a lot of obscenity, I find. I was not comfortable doing that. No, but they talk to each other in a very, very different way than women, talk to each other. And so one thing I deliberately decided, I need to have an A-team, I need to reach out to these people regularly. And yeah, it isn't all about me, what I can get. It's also about what I can give. And one thing I do is I always share my business plan. I always share with people my vision of the future of my business and my roadmap, and that gets them excited about helping me. And also you talked about, for, people finding proteges. I think that, if you're looking to be somebody's protege, if you have something, that you've written down, so this is what I'm planning on doing with my life. I mean, how excited would you be if you saw somebody who's like, wow, it's like they're really thinking about their future, and I want to support that. I want to help that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, I think Addie made a really good point about risk-taking, too, with networking, and I think this applies beyond networking as well, is you do sometimes just have to go out and do it, and sometimes you're going to ask for something, and somebody's going to say no, but there's tremendous value in that too, because when they say no and the sun doesn't fall out of the sky or the earth doesn't stop spinning, that's really useful information. That was useful information for me to learn as a professional, that when I took a risk and asked for something or pitched something and it didn't work out exactly the way I had planned, that it was okay, I could move on, and then that gives you tremendous freedom later, because you're less afraid the next time, because you realize that if somebody says no, it's really not that big a deal, and no isn't always about you. And I think that's another big piece of networking, is you have to stop making it just about you, because the fact of the matter is the other people aren't thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. And so if they say no, it may well not have anything at all to do with you. And so I think for women particularly, sometimes we need to get outside our own heads and just have a little shift in perspective that makes things like networking a lot easier when we realize that, all right, if I just look at it a little bit differently, it suddenly becomes a lot easier.
We did this panel discussion in San Francisco, and one of our panelists was the CEO of Lean In. So not Sheryl Sandberg, but she has an organization, and we were asking each of the panelists, what's your advice? You know, what's your secret sauce? What's the secret to your success? And she said, I fail really well. I fail really well. So I don't fear it anymore. I've learned how to do it. And that has opened so many doors because I was so concerned about failing, the things that it stopped me from doing. And she said, so her advice for women was learn to fail. You probably are the only one who even notices, but learn to fail, and it's amazing what you will do. And I thought that was some of the best advice I've heard. Yeah.
All of the very successful women I've interviewed have great failures that they drew from, because failure also teaches you how to rebound. Yeah. It makes you more resilient. It teaches you a better way to operate. And for those of you who are parents, there are experts who actually say that letting your daughters, your children, see you fail is useful because that's an opportunity to teach them to be resilient and to rebound from mistakes and to take chances. And I find, both as a mom and a professional, I find that very freeing because that gives me permission to just go for it. And if I screw up, there's some value in that.
At Google, we have a mantra, fail fast, fail often. I mean, that's just company-wide. Yet it's still very, very difficult to embrace that and adopt that. And it doesn't mean fail with the numbers or fail at a sale, or it means find little bits and pieces of ways to try new things. The calculated risks, of course, but we have that in our culture, but I still find it very, very difficult to adopt. But it's nice to know that it's there for me to point to.
Right, absolutely. Let's move a little bit, towards the home front a little bit. Work-life balance, life-work balance, work-life harmony. You know, we've heard it said many ways. Two big topics there. Number one, is this a woman's issue? Right, it often is talked about as being a woman's issue, but I think more and more, and certainly in discussions with men, that's clearly not the case. Both men and women grapple with this issue, and more seem to both own it. With the possible exception of your husband, who, kidding. And then the second thing is, what can organizations do to help? Again, both men and women with work-life balance and work-life history. I know Harmony, there was the very famous CEO of that other tech company who canceled all work from home.
Right.
Right? I mean, that is...
A former Googler.
A former Googler,
yes.
My goodness.
So
apples and trees. Yeah.
Yes.
How did that go over at Google when she did that? What was the
we were thinking, okay, we're next. Google's next. This thing is going away, working from home, flexibility, part-time, maternity. We all felt, oh, wow, this is where the world's going. But this was just a personal choice that she decided to make. And there were signs that she needed to do this to rein some people in. There were a lot of people taking advantage of it, working from home for weeks at a time, right? That doesn't necessarily create great work culture. And when you're at work type of thing. So there were some other reasons why she did that, but it did instill a little bit of, oh, okay, this isn't going to be reality forever, and we should really embrace it and not take advantage of it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Some strategies. Here are some strategies that either women can employ or companies can employ to help people achieve better balance.
Well, first of all, I think women need to choose. They need to define what they want. So when you're looking at wanting to accomplish everything, you're looking at wanting to be everything to everybody, you're not zeroing in on what your own priorities are. So you need to define what you want, and you need to define it in terms of what you do want, not in terms of what you don't want. And I've heard a lot of women say, I don't want to have a job that makes it impossible for me to be with my kids. Well, I do want to succeed in this way, and maybe I do want to walk my kids to school, or I do want to, whatever it is that they want. So I think it's really important to define what you want. But I think it's also important to realize that one size doesn't fit all, and that just because something works for another woman doesn't mean it's going to work for you. I encountered this myself when I was a newspaper reporter at the Sun-Times. I had been a special projects reporter, and it was my dream job. I had always wanted to be a reporter. I had always wanted to have this platform where I could go out and uncover injustices and then see it change, because I had written about it on the front page of a big newspaper. And then I got pregnant with my first daughter, and I was actually just wrapping up a big investigation, and that came out a couple days after she was born. And I thought for a couple of days that I had achieved sort of this perfect work-life balance. And then I went back to work after maternity leave and thought, all right, how am I going to make this fit? And fortunately, the Sun-Times was really open to different flexible arrangements, and they agreed to let me work part-time. And so I talked to all these mentors and women who told me, you know, if they'll let you work part-time, that's perfect. That's, you know, that's what you're looking for. And so I thought, all right, and I looked around and I saw all these other women, both at the newspaper and in other jobs, who had part-time arrangements, and it worked really well. So I went back to work part-time and really quickly discovered that I couldn't be a special projects reporter if I was only working a couple days a week, because the way I had gotten all those big stories done was to completely throw myself into it and to work constantly and to keep digging when I saw something in data or something came up in an interview, to just keep digging. And so instead, what was happening is I was going to work, and then I had to go home and stop thinking about it and take care of my baby. To make matters worse, on the days when I was at work, that was inevitably when my child would take her first steps or do something that I was missing. And so I really quickly started thinking, okay, I have just been handed the perfect arrangement in the perfect job, doing exactly what I wanted, and I am failing at all of it. I'm not doing the kinds of stories I want to do. I'm missing all this stuff at home. What's wrong with me? Because everybody said if they'll give you this perfect work arrangement, you'll be able to have it all. And I wound up quitting that job because I finally just said, look, I need to figure this out. And I did. But what I learned is that for me, working fewer hours wasn't the answer. It wasn't about the number of hours I worked. It was whether or not I had control over them. Mm-hmm. And I wound up writing a book next, and I worked easily 3 times the number of hours while I was writing that book, but I was in control of it. Yep. It was predictable, because I knew that if I needed to, I could work at night. I was taking on other jobs and speaking and writing columns for newspapers on the side, but it was all within my control.
Right, so it's not about working less, it's about having flexibility to,
for me,
to do the positive, the things that you've decided you're absolutely going to do.
For me, though.
For you.
That's different for everyone.
I've heard that a lot. I think that's a common theme.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's a personal, like, work-life balance, everybody has their own definition of, you know, what that means. Some women like to work a lot, you know, and some women, you know, and when you're at different life stages, right? You know, have different priorities. And one thing that's really, because I'm a mom as well, I've got a 5-year-old, and I decided to make a career. I used to work for Lehman Brothers. Y'all know what happened. I wasn't responsible. I was in equities, not bonds, by the way. But I decided to make a career change at the same time that I was pregnant. And one thing that I realized pretty quickly is like, well, you know, there's a lot of things that I need to do, and there's no way that I could do this alone. So again, having that A-team, having that support network. And one thing that's really helped me out is, you know, just having a lot of, so, you know, I've had a, you know, live-in nanny, I have babysitters. I mean, there's a lot of people who are supporting me. And, You know, and one thing I had to let go was like, well, I'm not going to be that ideal mom. You know, you pick and choose. I'm not going to be a perfectionist. I have to admit, I have no idea what size clothes my daughter wears, you know? And I also don't know how to change a diaper. In fact, she was, I know. So anyway, we just left. It is funny because one time I was trying to change her diaper and she said, Mom, you're doing it all wrong. You need to put this thing over here. My daughter's telling me how to change a diaper. You know, but I'm fine.
What's that story?
I'm fine with that because there's so many things that I am going to, you know, that I can contribute to her, but there are a lot of things that I'm just not going to be good at it. And that's okay, you know? Because the priority right now is building my business, and then these other things are, you know, they're just going to have to wait, and I'm okay with that, you know. But in a couple years, things are probably going to be different. And I think the role of organizations is that organizations just have to be adaptable because life is so complicated. You know, every day is just so complicated. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. We're always on guard. It's like, I have no idea. You know, my child, I'm going to get a call from the school, and this is not going to be good. You know, it's going to turn everything, you know, on its head. And so organizations just have to be really flexible for women and men, and just understand that our lives are really complex.
I'll add one thing to that in terms of, again, I'm talking a lot about Google, but that's only because it's the best company so far that I've worked for, and I've worked for a lot of big companies. To embrace that adaptiveness, you know, companies have to be adaptive. Google embraces and advocates one simple thing. So whatever your one simple thing is, own it, talk about it, have it up on your desk at work, be unapologetic about it. My one simple thing, I have to get out at 5 o'clock for my run. Or if 5 o'clock's not gonna work, it's gonna be 4, and then I'm gonna be back online later on in the afternoon. I become a different person when I don't get my run in, and that's super important to me, but because I talk about it, I own it, I'm unapologetic about it, my team supports me in that, and therefore they hold me accountable, and I hold them accountable too. If it's working out in the morning and being in at 10, if your schedule can allow for it, that's what it is, and it's different for everybody, but that allows everybody to have their own personal work, you know, a teeny tiny bit of help towards that work-life balance.
Now, you were asking what companies could do, and I think we need to hit on that before we leave the subject. There's a list called the 100 Best Companies for Working Mothers. You know that list? Those are pretty good companies to work for. They've already adopted the policies and the practices, and they have the women that are managing very successfully to have families. Women are going to have families. I mean, everywhere you go. They're the highest executive, she says, I'm a mom first. I heard Roz Brewer, the CEO of Sam's Club the other day, say, I'm a mom first. Women are going to have families. That's just part of the way the workplace is going to be from now on. And smart companies who know that they should be capitalizing on the talent that women represent are putting in the policies and practices. And if you want to know what they are, have your company apply for the list. You may not make it, you may make it, but you can always benchmark against that list and know, because on that application you can find out all of the different things that a company can do to make work-life balance possible.
Fascinating. Excellent. Okay, very good advice. All right, I'm going to open it up to the floor for a few questions. It's always good to hear the subjects that you want to dig into a little bit more. Who will be the brave, confident, risk-taking first question asker? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
Great topics, and thank you for touching on everything, just about everything, including culture, which is really important and changing. But I just wanted to get to very specifics in with respect to networking, and maybe some tips in terms of, should you be networking up? Should you be networking laterally? How often? Like just some basic tactical stuff.
I advise that you do at least 2 or 3 things a week, which is really hard for women. Certainly get up from your desk and walk around your office at some point. I remember being, my first corporate job, I was in academia for a long time, and then I entered the corporate world, and I remember walking around the office, and all the women were at their desks, and none of the men were at their desks. And where were the men? Well, they were in each other's offices talking, and they were also going out to lunch together. And I thought, well, that's pretty frivolous, isn't it? But no, they were talking business while they were out to lunch, and they were giving each other advice, and they were talking about new opportunities that were coming up and how to do this and how to do that. So you need to be connecting, yes, up, No reason not to have lunch with your boss a couple times a year for sure, maybe even more often than that. And get yourself involved in cross-company projects so that you can meet people in various divisions. Don't be a stalker, but find out what people are doing that you think are really interesting and great and who might be able to help you, and go to where they are, whether it's an internal event or an external event. When you go to an event like this, meet the speakers, talk to other people who are there, and don't just say, here's my card. I mean, you have to have a reason to exchange information. And one of the very best tips that I could ever give is to ask someone who is a senior leader a question about something that they've done. I heard that you did this, and can you tell me a little bit about how you did that? Everybody loves to talk about themselves. Everybody loves to be able to explain how and maybe help you. And that's a good way to start a relationship that may or may not turn into a mentor relationship, but it's certainly going to turn into something that could be useful to you. So up, down, across, peers, below, you've got to have networks. I mean, it's the more senior you get, the more connected you need to be to the people that are working for you, with you, among you. And admins too. Make friends with all the admins. They're wonderful people.
I'll add one thing to that. It takes a little bit of time, and it is absolutely doing your homework. But map out the areas of people that are missing in your roadmap or in your plan or in your family tree that would really benefit you. For example, I am not in nonprofit, but I would love to be on a board of nonprofit. Okay, great. Start there. Start to map out, navigate where I can find those people, who I might know that knows somebody who works there, but really take the time and map out the areas that are missing, because otherwise networking is just kind of like spray and pray, and that might not be that successful, and you might feel frustrated or overwhelmed or, oh, screw that, that was a lot of work for no benefit. Make it useful for you. Meet one person at that networking event, or talk to one new person at the office walking around. It's something I should just do every day, and I don't. But just even these little reminders.
But you will now.
Okay. I will now, absolutely.
I think it's also important to remember, though, that it's a marathon and not a sprint. I remember early on in my career thinking, okay, if I'm going to take the time to go out and meet people, I need to come back with something very tangible from every meeting. And one thing I learned as I moved through my career doing a bunch of different types of things is that often somebody I would meet and have a meaningful conversation with, and all that came out of it was a meaningful conversation and a connection and, you know, let's stay in touch, would later turn into a huge opportunity or advantage, because either I would remember something that that person told me, and later when that became relevant to what I was working on, I would think, right, I talked to her, I talked to him about this, and I would get back in touch and there'd be a good reason to do it. Or we would, I remember, you know, at one point somebody getting in touch with me and saying, hey, let's just have lunch and talk about, you know, the work you've done. And I came back from the lunch and thought, well, you know what, nothing came out of it. Well, a couple of years later, that person recommended me for a job out of the blue, and I got it. And it was just because of that lunch that I thought nothing could come out of.
Excellent. Yes.
Hi, I'm Julie Nagel, and I lead the Human Resources team for Harris Associates. So I'm in financial investment, asset management, and I really appreciate the difference that you described around mentor and sponsor. I think that we don't differentiate enough in really what a sponsor is, and I appreciate the conversation about networking as well. What I haven't heard a lot of is around a differentiator that I see in women in leadership, and that is truly understanding the business and having that business mind and having a seat at the table by being able to talk about the business strategies, the mission, the vision, how we're going to get there. And maybe that's more important in my role as human resources, but I just would like one or more of you to just speak about the importance as women continue to move throughout an organization and truly understanding the business.
Yeah, I'll just start that off. I think that Betty made some very good points in her opening remarks around P&L responsibility. And I know that that's something that I always look at when you look at the boards of companies, and there are women present, what are their roles, right? So there are the marketing and HR executive roles. There are the operational and P&L holding roles, and women are sorely underrepresented in those roles. Why did they not seek those careers? Why did they not seek those channels moving up? I think that's the big question. It is certainly never for a lack of competence. I think that those roles are ones where confidence are more important. Confidence display becomes more of a success factor than in some of the other roles because they are the more business-oriented roles. And I think women get stuck in the middle echelons in those positions more often and are less likely to make it all the way up. That's my first comment. And the second comment I would say is that it's a well-known behavior, and I think we've discussed it a little bit here today, that women listen a lot in meetings. And very often, you know, their unspoken content would be excellent, but they say nothing. And perhaps when they leave later, they'll pull somebody aside, perhaps the chief executive or one of the other members, and make some very good points. And I'll think, you know, why was that? Why didn't you speak about that? Why didn't you make that point to the whole room? And so it's not that they're not business-minded. It's not that they're not as commercially able. It's that they are quiet, they're listening, they're thinking, and they're afraid to throw their hat in the ring and say the wrong thing. So I think that's the difference sometimes in boardroom behavior that in the end gets them stuck a couple of layers below the C-suite, right? We'll come back in one moment. That's great.
Oh,
yes, ma'am.
The 80-20 thing is relevant here too. That women want to feel like they know at least 80% of a job before they take it, and they're not necessarily going to be asked to do it. Men are going to be raising their hands to do it, and so they're going to be given those positions over the women. So, as an HR person, you should be thinking about matchmaking with women who have this high potential. And there's a lot of training opportunities that are out. There's university programs. You know, there's a great one here at Sloan. Is it Sloan that has a? What is your business school at the University of Chicago?
What's the Booth School of Business?
Booth.
Yeah.
For that you can send women from your company to have to get P&L training in order to be able to run a P&L, and also to have work on case studies. Or you can implement it at your own organization and have women
An executive development program that does just that. Absolutely. Yeah. No question. Yes. Question.
More of a, hi, Tina Nagel from CNA Insurance. More of a comment that I think is a little bit of the nuance of maybe what you were saying. I also work in human resources. I think that even if you aspire, so I think of myself, I don't aspire to run a P&L, right? But I aspire to be at the top of my game in HR and run an HR and sit at the table and be at the board or be a chief of operations that includes HR someday. But I think what you're saying is I have to understand all the nuances of how the P&L works and be able to talk the talk and understand how the business makes money, even to be able to be extremely successful in a support type role at a senior level. So I think that's the nuance of, don't lose sight of, you may not aspire to run a P&L, but if you still want to rise in your career, you need to understand the ins and outs of how the P&L works.
And you have to talk like a member of the executive team who happens to have HR as their portfolio, not the head of HR who happens to sit at the table.
Yeah.
Right. No question.
Good point.
Very good point. Any last questions? Yes.
I have a question about resilience. I think each of you talked about that confidence gap being a matter of resilience and fail well, but each of you had stories about then where you failed and how you learned from it. So how did you learn from that? I mean, you just go home and sleep on it, and you woke up and said, oh, that was it. I mean, what are some tools, tricks, techniques to say, how do you become more personally resilient when you fail?
Yeah, I like to respond to that.
Yeah.
Because for me, I took the confidence quiz. Did any of you guys do that? It only takes like 5 minutes. Yeah, I scored very, very high in confidence. But I feel like every day I do need to work on it because, you know, in financial services, people are constantly saying no, there's a lot of rejection. And one thing that I recognized about myself is that, you know, something happens, because I am a perfectionist, you know, somebody moved my cheese, I'm in a bad mood, you know, but I have to I tell myself, okay, I just gotta, get over this, get on with my life. So what? So I tell myself, so what? I make a mistake, so what? And it's very much about the discipline and having control over the emotions, because I cannot control what the market is gonna do. I cannot control what's gonna happen in the next 15 seconds. The only thing that I can control is my emotional response. And so I just focus on that. And also what I find is for other people in stressful situations, they know they can count on me. Chloe's gonna be really cool. She's gonna be very calm. We can count on her. That's what I'm famous for. So stressful situations, I'm the clutch player, but controlling the emotions and deciding in advance, something bad is gonna happen, somebody moves my cheese, I am just, not gonna be upset, I'm gonna say so what, and just get on, and just keep moving forward.
Mine is fake it till you make it. I know that is sometimes not condoned, but I was reading in some of the articles. But I've had that mantra since college. When you don't want to get out of bed, and I'm not talking about physical illness, I'm talking about mentally. I'm not ready for that exam, or I just don't want to be around people today. But every single day, I fake it till I make it. And when I'll make it is probably part of the problem, because I keep striving for perfection. I'll make it one day. But the point is that you kind of trick yourself into that confidence, and that gets you through the day. And then there's 10 opportunities for you to gain more confidence. And that's my ritual pretty much every day. I don't know if that's helpful.
A very wonderful piece of advice that was given for my book 10 years ago, 15 years ago, however long ago it was, by a woman who runs a construction company. I think she owns the Denver Broncos now. She grew up in a big family. And they were actually, I think she had 7 or 8 brothers, but anyway, they had a baseball team. And this is the advice that she learned from that men know. There's always another inning. Mm-hmm. So like you strike out, big deal. You're gonna have another chance to be at bat. There's always another inning. And Monet knows this, Mm-hmm. The girls who are playing baseball now know this, but it's been a much harder thing for women to learn. Yeah. That you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over.
And then there's another chance.
Yep. Everything doesn't reside in that one moment.
I think that's a really important point. And I think
for you experienced that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a reporter, I would have to, though, also prioritize the level of failures and figure out, okay, well, because as a reporter, and this is where I started out, and just to give you a little background, I went to Northwestern's School of Journalism, and they have something there called a Medill F. So they basically train perfectionism into you and train the fear into you so you won't go out into the working world and embarrass them. And so the rule is, if you make a mistake in a paper, and this is just a college paper, any mistake, any factual error, you automatically fail the paper. It could be a misplaced comma or a misspelling or a factual error. Most people I knew had at least one Medill F. Mine was that I misspelled the word Manhattan, which is terrible because I'm from New York. And
that's bad.
It was really bad. I spelled it T-E-N.
Wow.
It was a typo, but I didn't copy edit my work. I was a freshman. The second one, you fail the class. The third one, supposedly you get kicked out of the journalism school, but nobody I knew ever made it past their first one because it was so horrifying to get your Medill F. And so the idea, though, is when they then send you out into the journalism world, working for big newspapers, they want you to be afraid of making a mistake. And the newspapers continue to sort of drill that into you. And so when I was starting off, I knew, okay, I really have to be careful about making these kinds of mistakes. And at first, that held me back because I spent a lot of time sort of wringing my hands and running those 8 extra laps after I'd crossed the finish line, and making sure that I checked and rechecked, and eventually I developed the confidence to just check it once, and if it was right, to trust that I had checked it accurately. But it was always really important for me to know, okay, there are certain mistakes that I really can't make. I have to pull out all the stops to make sure I get my facts right in this story. Because at worst, I could get sued for libel. The best case scenario is that I have to write a correction that runs in the paper, and that's fairly horrifying to have to do. And so I knew, okay, I have to be really careful here. But there were other things where maybe I didn't need to pull out all the stops. That, for instance, asking somebody if I could interview them. I mean, then that's a pretty simple thing. Or building sources, or pitching a story that I wanted to go after but wasn't completely sure. I mean, I didn't know how it would pan out. Those were risks I could take. So I really found that it was important to sort of prioritize the level of failure and to know when I needed to pull out all the stops and be a perfectionist, and when it was okay to say, you know what, this is good enough.
Women apparently internalize failure more than men do. So we fail and we say, you see, that was because you weren't good enough, and you will always be like that, and that will follow you everywhere. That's a very unhealthy thought process. Men in general and people who take risks internalize success, but they're better at taking their failures and either externalizing them a little bit, blaming them on forces and believing that, I could be in that same scenario 2 weeks from now and I might do a whole lot better. My stars were not aligned today. And as much as that feels like wimping out a little bit, it's actually a very healthy mental state and one you can actually learn. And the other thing that I've heard people say is you can relive it, replay it this time, make it, decide what you would do, win this time, do it better this time, so you don't fear that situation the next time it happens. So deal with the failure, figure out what you did wrong, repair it, and then you can face it again tomorrow, which is still internalizing, because nobody will probably ever stop doing that, but they're internalizing it constructively. And, that allows us to play again another day. And I think that, that internalization of failure can be a strength and a weakness. So I think you all look a little dehydrated. I want to thank you all for your attention and for your great questions, and invite you to join us for a cocktail.